The time's finally come to get a little bit salty. How's it going, my fellow aquarium scientists? It's Professor Fish Tanks here, and today we are finally going to start a project that I've been talking about for months, especially on the live streams. So if you haven't been watching the live streams, you probably don't know what I'm talking about, but I will talk about it in just a little bit. But basically, this is something that has been way long overdue, and I don't really have much time to do it quite the way I want to do in terms of taking my time, but hopefully towards the end of this video series things will be perfectly fine, so fingers crossed. So if you guys aren't fully aware of this project, basically it started around the early months of this year during a live stream where we were talking about saltwater aquariums and planted saltwater aquariums or macroalgae setups, and just talking about its, how it's started to become more popular. Before, people would only keep corals or reefs and things like that, but a lot of saltwater hobbyists have started going into the world of macroalgae. And after the live stream, I kind of thought about it a little bit, and also during the live stream somebody mentioned that how cool it would be to have a saltwater planted aquarium brought to the Keystone Clash. And if you don't know what the Keystone Clash is, it's an all species aquarium show that's held in Morgantown, PA, and this year it's going to be October 4th to the 6th. So make sure you check that out if you aren't aware of it. I'll leave the link down below. But basically, I'm a vendor there with Atlantic Aquariums, and during this live stream somebody mentioned how it would be cool for me to set up a saltwater planted tank and bring it to the Clash to set up so people can actually see it in person and get some inspiration in case anybody's always been interested in it. And that got me thinking about actually doing it, but unfortunately, due to space and financial reasons, I couldn't really do it. But I decided to open up the project as a funded project from the aquarium community. And so I reached out to the fish fam, the aquarium community, basically telling them my idea and if anybody was interested in helping out. And very graciously, a lot of people were able to pitch in for the necessary stuff for this project, and we were able to get things going. And so after that live stream and after getting all the necessary funds, I started getting all the stuff I needed for it, and thankfully I finally have gotten everything I need to get this tank set up. And so basically what it's going to be is I'm going to be setting up the aquarium. It's going to be a saltwater planted tank, so it's going to be focusing on macroalgae. There's not going to be any corals or anything like that. And this is going to be a video series of me setting it up, kind of talking about it, the biology, the engineering, if you will, the equipment, the chemistry and things like that, kind of going through the process, so that way if you guys are interested in setting up a saltwater planted tank, you'll kind of have a base knowledge of what you need and how to go about it. Full disclosure, this is my first time ever setting up a macroalgae setup. I'm more familiar with corals than I am with macroalgae. So a lot of the knowledge that I'm bringing with me for this project is based off of my knowledge of saltwater aquaria as well as freshwater planted tanks in terms of chemistry and fertilizations and things like that. So do bear with me. I am basically learning along with you guys, but hopefully the knowledge that I have been able to acquire pertaining to this style of aquariums, hopefully I'll be able to teach you guys a little bit about it. So this setup I'm actually going to be bringing to the Clash, and it's going to be on display at the Atlantic Aquariums booth. And what we're going to be doing is for the entirety of the event, it'll be on display, so you guys are welcome to come and check it out And then this tank is actually going to be raffled off. And in order for you to be placed into the raffle, you do have to purchase something from Atlantic Aquariums. And then you'll get a raffle ticket and you'll be placed in there. And the raffle winner will be announced at the last day of the event on Sunday. And basically whoever wins it gets to take the entire setup. So the tank, the filtration, the maintenance supplies, all that. And you'll get to have basically a already set up planted saltwater tank that you can take home with you. So in this video, I'm actually going to be talking about the placement of the tank, or where I'm going to be setting it up, as well as the tank itself, the size, all that, as well as filtration, lighting, and maybe I'll get into a little bit of the hardscape, but mostly it's going to be the equipment and supplies, if you will, that I'm going to be using for this tank. But also what I'm going to be talking about is if I wasn't transporting this tank, if this was my own tank or aquarium that I'm setting up for my home, how I would actually go about doing it, whereas the actual size of the aquarium that I would use, the type of filtration that I think would be appropriate for something like this, things like that. So that way, if you want to do something a bit bigger or a bit differently, you have a little bit of leeway to do that. I most likely am not going to cover everything. I might forget certain things, but for the most part, the purpose of this series is to get you guys a basic understanding of not just macroalgae tanks in general, but saltwater in general. So if you're somebody that's been doing freshwater for most of their hobby life, and you've been thinking about doing saltwater but a little bit intimidated by it, hopefully this will kind of help you get into that, especially if you're a planted tank type of person. So the first thing ever that you want to think about when you are setting up a new aquarium is location. Now in my case, for this setup, it's a temporary tank for me. It's not my personal tank. I'm not going to set it, maintain it for years to come. It's going to be going to a show and then to somebody else's home. So I don't really need to think much about where I'm going to place it. I just need to put it somewhere where I could easily maintain it until the show, obviously. And the only place that I could really think of was this stand right over here. So this is just a basic metal stand that I got from Home Depot, I believe, to store some stuff for the business, as well as just regular aquarium stuff. And as you can tell, there's a lot of junk here. So first things first is I got to clear all this stuff. So hang tight for a second. And by the power of YouTube, it's clear. So I was able to get most of the stuff off of it. There's still some stuff in the bottom here, but it's fine. So now that I have this cleared off, we do have a decent amount of space for the tank. Now you might be thinking, considering how long this is, that I'm probably not going to be using a really big tank, and you are absolutely correct. But before I talk about the tank, there's one thing I do want to mention. So this stand has it's like metal bars on here, or whatever you want to call it, and usually it wouldn't be an issue to put a tank on here, especially a one that has like a rim on it. However, it is good practice when you're putting a tank, just a regular tank, on anything. You want to put like a little mat on the bottom, and the reason for that is to minimize any stress spots, if you will. So if the place that you're putting the tank on is uneven, or there's something underneath the tank that could be a pressure point, it can crack the glass. And so to minimize it, we put a mat underneath it. And the mat that I'm actually using is from SR Aquaristic. It's their aquarium mat that is mostly sized for their tanks, but it is also cuttable. You can cut it to size if you want. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to be putting the tank on top of here, and I'm going to use like a box cutter to cut the size for it. And then we'll be able to put that on here and then put the tank on here. And I'm also going to show you guys the tank that I'm going to be using. Alrighty, so I've got the tank up here. I was able to cut the aquarium mat down to size. What I ended up doing was using the box cutter to score it, and then I just used scissors to cut the mat to size. And I still got a bunch left over from it that I can actually use for a different size tank if I need to. So I'm definitely going to be keeping the aquarium mat. But as you guys can tell, this is the tank we're going to be using for this setup. So it is a Aqueon all glass 10-gallon tank, rimmed tank that you can get at any aquarium store or big box store. This I got during the Petco aquarium sale that they usually have, tank sale that they have for their like 10-gallon, 20 gallons, things like that. From my understanding, they've actually gotten rid of the dollar per gallon sale, and they've done it now that it's just 50% off, which is great. Great. But anyway, so this is the tank I'm using. Now, the reason I've decided to choose a 10-gallon tank is for ease of transport, basically. That it's easier to move around. It's not going to be too heavy, things like that. Now, there's pros and cons to having this type of a tank for this type of a setup, especially when we're talking about saltwater here. So let me start with the pros. So the pro is obviously it's a smaller tank size, smaller footprint, so you can easily put this on like a nightstand or a dresser or a countertop or anything that has a space for a 10-gallon tank. You don't have to get a big stand to put the tank on. And you know, it's a nano tank, so if you are somebody that's just can only maintain a small tank and don't have enough money to get a really large tank, this is definitely an affordable alternative, if you will. Now, the cons to this. So there are a few cons to this. One being, when I talk about especially to new people that are coming into the hobby, I always recommend the bigger the better, and there are a few reasons for that, especially when we're talking about saltwater. So for saltwater, one of the things is the smaller the aquarium size, the harder it is to maintain water quality. That can also be said for freshwater, but mainly for saltwater especially. The main thing being the saltwater itself. When saltwater is evaporating, what happens? The water evaporates, it leaves behind the salt. That increases salinity in your tank, and especially if you're keeping something that's very sensitive to salinity swings, you don't want that. If you had a larger aquarium, the amount of evaporation that's going on is going to be very less than the amount of evaporation that's going on in a 10-gallon tank in relation to the salinity, if that makes sense. So on a smaller tank, if you have this much water that has been evaporated, right, like up to here, the salinity swings are way greater than if I had a larger 100-gallon or 150-gallon tank and it had this much water evaporated. So one being salinity, another being the water chemistry itself with the nitrogen cycle and other parameters itself. It's way easier for you to manage nitrate swings or ammonia swings in a larger volume of water than it is on a smaller volume. More frequent water changes, things like that. So ideally, it's just better to go bigger the better. Usually for saltwater, I recommend the smallest tank size to be 20 to 40 gallons, especially 40 gallons. And then usually when we get to about I want to say 10, not even, I would say 20 gallon, maybe 10 gallons for saltwater is when we're getting into nano category. Now in freshwater, this is not a nano tank, right? But in the saltwater world, this is considered a nano tank. So, but for this purpose, for this type of setup, the fact that it's going to be transported and that I want it to be easy to place for whoever is going to end up winning this tank, I've decided to go with the 10-gallon tank. So that's basically what it is, just a traditional rimmed Aqueon 10-gallon tank. And with that being said, the next step is basically to remove the sticker, and I'm actually going to be rinsing out the aquarium, and I'm actually going to be following Master Breeder Dean, who suggested that when you are preparing the tank to be set up and you're rinsing it out, rinse it out with Dawn dish soap, because apparently it's safe. It's the only dish soap really that is safe for animals. They use it for like oil spills and things like that. And if the master breeder recommends it, I'm going to do it. And the reason for that is because sometimes there can be like a little bit of a film, like a greasy film. It's just from, you know, it when it comes out of the factory. And so it's just easy to rinse it out with a little bit of diluted Dawn dish soap and warm water, and just make sure you wash it out really well and let it air dry until it's completely dry before you put anything in it. So that's what we're going to do, and once I'm done with that, we'll be back, and we're going to then move on to the equipment that's going to go on this. So let's take a moment to talk about the equipment that's going to be going on this setup, starting with the filtration. So there were a multitude of ways that I can filter this size of a setup and this type of a setup. I can do the hang-on back filtration, like I'm doing with this guy right here, or I can do a canister filter. Now you'd be thinking, why would you want to hook up a large canister to a tank like this? Well, one thing I will say is that we've come a long way in aquarium filtration, and we finally have canister filters that are small enough that you can really hook it up to a 10-gallon tank. And the canister, and what I decided to go with is a canister filter. Now I'll tell you why I went with the canister filter, but let me just show you which one I decided to go with. And it is the Oase FiltoSmart Thermo 100 canister filter. So, by the way, this is not sponsored by Oase. They didn't pay me to use their product. I personally have used Oase's filters and really like them, and I'm going to explain to you why I do like it. But yeah, so I decided to go with a canister filter. One of the reasons is basically more water volume. So I'm already dealing with 10 gallons, but then have this here. With this here, it adds a bit more of a water volume. So it allows me to manage the water chemistry and the water quality a little bit better. That does not mean you cannot filter that tank with a hang-on bag filter. You can easily hook up a Fluval Aqua Clear hang-on bag, or a Oase BioStyle hang-on filter that is rated for, I would say, more than 10 gallons, so maybe up to 20 gallons, just to give it a bit more power and more filtration capacity, if you will. But those are other options that I would recommend for this size of a tank. Obviously, if it was way larger than this, usually my go-to is if it's more than, I want to say, let's say more than 40 gallons. If we're getting into like the 50-gallon range or things like that, I wouldn't use a hang-on bag filter or even a canister filter. I would use a traditional sump. But yeah, so for this setup, I've decided to use the Oase FiltoSmart Thermo, the Thermo version. Now it comes non-thermo, and I'll explain to you why it says thermo and what that means, but this is the Thermo 100. So let's open this puppy up. So there are a bunch of videos out there for an unboxing of this filter, so I'm not going to go too in-depth about it, but I'm still going to talk about it just a little bit as to why I like it. And we'll then get this hooked up to the tank, and then we'll talk about the other pieces of equipment. If I can get this box up, there we go. Okay. I am going to be honest with you, this is my first time working with the FiltoSmart. I've mainly worked with the Biomasters, the larger canister filters. I've worked with them. So right off the bat, opening this up, the first thing that I am greeted with is a bag of biological media. This is a ceramic media, I'm assuming, which is great. I've got the airline tubing. Now, not the airline tubing, the filter tubing. Now, what I like about Oase is they don't give you clear tubing, and the reason for that is obviously over time, unless you maintain the tubing, it's going to get gunked up with algae. And the fact that it's not transparent, you're not really going to see it much. Now, you'll know that it's becoming a problem where stuff is starting to accumulate in here when the flow starts to decrease. And in that case, you definitely want to purge it and use like a hose brush. So Awaze actually makes or sells a brush that you can snake through here and clean it. But basically, if the water flow starts to decrease, you're noticing a little less flow, it's most likely that the filter itself needs to be maintained, but also the hosing. So just something to keep in mind. So we've got, I'm going to move this over here because I don't have enough room on this table. So we've got the biological media, the hose, and then we have tubing for, this doesn't have holes in it, so this is going to be for the intake. And this one does have holes in it, so this is the spray bar for the output, which I may or may not use for this one. And then we've got our elbows, our strainer, our suction cups. And then this, I believe, is for the heater. So this is a holder for the heater. And this is a cap for the heater. I'm going to explain why they would give this to you. And then let's pull this sucker out very gently. Here it is. And then these are the feet, the little rubber feet to minimize vibration. And that's pretty much it. There's an instruction manual and like the warranty stuff in here, which I don't really need. I'll grab that later. And here it is. Hopefully you guys can see it properly. Pretty compact filter. Now this filter, let me mention real quick, is rated for up to 100 liters, which I don't remember what it is in gallons. I'll probably put it as I'm editing. But it's rated for up to 100 liters, thus it's called the Thermo 100. And so this is basically it. So you've got the body. It also comes with a stand, which I don't know entirely if it's built in. Yeah, it's probably built into that. Anyway, so you've got the filter body. This is the top portion. Obviously, you've got your inlet and outlet, and it's even marked. So this is in, this is out. And then this right here is the heater. That's why it's called the Thermo. So the one thing I love about Awaze's canister filters, especially the Thermo version, is instead of you putting the heater in the tank, the heater is in the canister filter. So that's less equipment you're going to have in the tank. Now, like I said, you can also get the non-thermo version, which basically doesn't come with the heater, and that's what that little blue cap is for. Is the non-thermo version will have that cap on there, which you would actually take off to fill the canister, this canister, with water. So you do have to pour water in to prime it. The Biomasters have a pump that self-primes basically, but the reason they've given me that cap and given me this is if let's say I don't need the heater, I'm heating the room, which I'm not currently, or I just for whatever reason want the heater in the tank. I can basically hook up, I can put 2 suction cups on here, take the heater out, pop that in here, and then the cap I can put back on here to seal the hole that's here. Now let's say if you got the non-thermo version and you wanted to put the heater into the canister filter, you can actually get, I believe, I don't know if it comes with the kit to convert this to thermo, or if you have to buy it separately. I'm not entirely sure, but basically you will put this little blue ring as well as the sleeve for the heater that I'm going to show you that's inside, and you can convert a non-thermo canister to a thermo. All right, so basically this is how it comes. It comes with 2 cords, obviously. One is for the filter itself, the other is for the heater. And what's interesting is if you look right here, anything that is blue, Oase wants you to interact with it. So in this case, what you see that's blue here are the latches for the hole. And so I'm just going to gently, if I remember exactly how that happens. There we go. So going to move that up. And then as you pull, it actually pops the thing open. And then I'm going to gently lift it up because the heater is in here. So there's the heater. Oops, excuse me. So there's the heater right there. And then it comes, which is really cool, it comes with a pre-sponge. So that's your output where the water's coming into the filter from, and it first goes through a pre-filter, which I really like with the Biomasters and the Filto Smarts. Because of the pre-filter, your actual biological media, especially for the larger Biomasters, you don't have to clean as much. You only have to clean this, really. So I'm going to put that back on there. And then basically, what you see here, let me put this down real quick. I need to be very careful because the heater in here is a glass heater. Okay, stay right there. Okay, so if you look right here, so this is a little sleeve for the heater to slip through, mainly because this is where the biological media is going to be. And so obviously you want to make sure that no biological media gets in the hole, or that there is a way for the heater to slip in through. Whereas if this wasn't here and you put biological media in, good luck trying to push it away. So that's pretty much smart. That's pretty smart. Now you see these are dividers. What's interesting is these dividers you can actually pull out. So let's say you want this entire thing filled with biological media. That's totally fine. But it just makes sense to have these dividers because of that pre-filter that comes with this thing. So I'm going to put that back in here. And then there's obviously another sponge right over here. And so basically where the water is going to go through, it's going to go through here, obviously fill this chamber up, but then it's going to push down this way. So it's going to go through this sponge, and then it's going to be pumped right back out. So if you noticed, this area is where the input and output is, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So what I'm going to do actually is one thing I want to mention as well. So I don't have any seasoned filter media that's saltwater. I only have freshwater, so I can't use freshwater in here, unfortunately. So basically I am going to use this, but if you had other saltwater tanks running, one thing that you can do is grab some already seasoned media, if it's small enough, out of there, plop it in here, or you can put this in a media bag, plop it in your saltwater system, and then when you're ready to set the canister up, you can then take that out and plop it in here, and then it speeds up your nitrogen cycle a little bit quicker. But in this case, I'm going to be using the media that came with the filter. So basically, I'm just going to rinse this down. It is a ceramic media. It's going to be very dusty, and I just want to get some of that out as much as possible. And then I'm going to plop it in here, so I'll be right back. And we're back with some clean filter media. So I just did a quick rinse through in tap water. Not a lot of dust came out, but there was still a bit of debris that, you know, was able to wash out. So always rinse out your filter media before you put it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this into this chamber right here, and I'm going to do my best not to get any in here. Otherwise, it's going to be quite a bit of a hassle. So I'm going to make sure that that sleeve is secure. And then I'm just going to grab a little bit, and I'm going to slowly pour it in there. And there we go. So I've got it all packed in there. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to use all of it, and I only have just a little bit of media left. I decided to not fill it all the way up. So I'll probably use the remainder media for something else, really. But yeah, so the biological media is now in there. One other thing that I'm going to do, and I'll do this later, is I'm also going to, take out the sponges, and I'm also going to rinse these out as well, just to get any debris out of it, just to be on the safe side. But yeah, so I am now going to grab this very carefully. Remember, this is a very fragile heater. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that the heater, you can only use Awaze heat up heaters for the canister filters. No other heater, I believe, will be able to fit. So just keep that in mind, that if you do get the thermo, or if you want to put the thermo on here, you are stuck with the Awaze heat up heaters, which are great heaters in my opinion. You can easily tell the temperature on the top here, and I believe you can also calibrate it as well if you notice the heater isn't keeping up the temperature. So now I am going to clamp these back up. Hopefully I am able to do it correctly, so bear with me. Okay, now it should be good. Okay, cool. So another thing I wanted to mention about the FiltaSmart, which is very similar to the Biomaster, and that's related to the inlet and input and output right here. And basically what it is you can also pull this out by twisting. There we go. So I just twisted it, and then you should be able to pull it out. Maybe not. Give me 1 second here. There we go. So you can pull this section out, and what's cool is when you twist it, it actually prevents any water from spilling out or siphoning back in, which is really cool for when you're doing maintenance. So you can literally keep your hoses on, pop this off, take your canister over to be maintained, and then basically when you're done cleaning the filter, you're just gonna plop it. You're gonna do the opposite of how you put it back in. So, and there are notches on here that allows you to basically fit it in properly. So I plopped it back on, and then I'm going to twist it back, and it is now locked in place, and the water can now freely go in and out, which is pretty cool, and I love that about these filters. Okay, so now I'm going to put this to the side real quick and kind of talk about the stuff here real quick. So with the hose here, they give you just one length of hose that you actually have to cut for the input and the output. Now what I tend to do really is first kind of stretch it out, which I'll do off camera. But if I can untangle this real quick. So you get one set of hose. So I'll usually stretch it out, and then what I do is the two ends I will put together like so, and kind of stretch it out, obviously. Find like the middle of the hose, kinda like right about here, and I'll cut that. That way I kind of have similar, basically the same length for the input and the output. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this, and then I'm going to move all the filter stuff to where the tank is and get this filter hooked up. So stay tuned. Alrighty, so I'm hoping you guys can see okay. I do apologize for the very weird angle, but if you can kind of see the tanks up here, this is kind of where I'm going to temporarily be putting the filter for now. The output is on this side, the input is on that side, and as you can tell, I've already cut the two hoses right over here. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to hook the hoses up. I'm also trying to kind of straighten the hose out. It's going to be very difficult to do that because they're brand new hoses basically. But basically just try bending it as much as you can. Alrighty. And so the hose is going to go on one side. Now if you're struggling to get the hose on, one thing you can do is run this under like hot water, and it expands the silicone. It makes it a little easier for you to put the hose in. But basically I have the hose on, and now what I'm going to do, if I can find the actual tool that I'm looking for here. Come on, there we go. So I have these two little screws, if you want to call them. Basically what they are is they help seal the tube or secure the tube, so there's not going to be any leaks or anything like that. Similar to like a hose clamp, if you will. You get 4 of these, 2 for these connections and 2 for the connections with the input and the output nozzle. And so I'm just going to slip this through. I'm trying to double check. A few moments later. Actually, I might be doing it incorrectly. Let me pull this out real quick. Because I think how it's supposed to do is you put the hose on. Okay. Like so. And now you're going to basically unscrew it. So the little thing's going to go up. And you'll notice as you screw, it's going to get tighter and tighter. So it's basically securing the hose. And there you have it. So I'm just hand tightening it. I don't want it too tight. And then I'm just going to screw this back on as well. And do the same thing with the other tubing. And another thing I should have probably done is also check to make sure that this is actually going to reach, which it looks like it is going to. So you want to make sure you also do that. Cool. So this is hooked up. I'm going to move this over here for just a moment. And next up, what we're going to do is talk about the input and the output. So let me grab the 2 pipes, the plastic pipes here. So this is the spray bar, right? Now you could use this on this tank here. You will have to cut it a little bit because it's a bit too long. I'm not going to use the spray bar. Instead, what I'm going to use is just this little attachment here, which is just going to make it as like an outflow nozzle. Whoop, don't want to lose that. So I'm just going to use that. Now, the thing that I wanted to talk about is the input tube, which if I hook up the strainer, right? So I put the strainer on here. Doesn't have to be too tight. We don't want to break it, right? It's too big. It's too big. I want the strainer to be around up to here, right? And so what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to saw this off. This has been an issue with other people that have used the Filto Smart for like a 10-gallon or even a 20-gallon, I believe, is that this is just a bit too small. One thing I wish Iwase did was, instead of making this one solid tube, make it telescopic, so that way we can adjust the size accordingly to it, so that way I don't have to cut it, because once I cut this, from my understanding, warranty goes away. But you know, but yeah, so I'm gonna have to cut it up so that way I can bring the strainer up a bit more. I want it around up to that height there, because I'm gonna have a sand bed. It's gonna be a 1-inch sand bed, but I still want it a bit up and I just have to kind of figure out exactly how much I want to cut it. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use like a hand saw, and I'm just going to chop it off, and hopefully it'll be up to size. So I'll be right back. And just like that, we are good to go. So I basically cut it up to size, and then I used sandpaper to kind of sand it down basically, and then I rinsed it very well because the last thing I want is microplastics getting in here. But yeah, Waze, if you're watching this, I would strongly suggest redesigning the input tube to be telescopic, where we can adjust the size so we don't have to cut it, because that was a pain in the butt to do. But yeah, so basically, if you look here, the output is on this side towards me. So the way I'm going to have this set up is the output is going to be on this side basically, and the input is going to be on this side. The output, which I'm just going to grab here real quick. So basically for the output, you have this, which is very similar to the input, and then you have this little elbow here. I'm dropping stuff today. Which goes in like this. And what's cool about this is you can actually adjust the direction of where you want to go. And then this little attachment is going to go right in here. So I'm just going to wedge that in there real quick. There we go, just like that. And that is going to go right next to this. So it's going to go right over here. This is going to go right next door to that, right? And I'm going to have it angled so that it's spraying like that direction. And basically the idea is the water is just going to basically go that way, circle around, and then go up the intake. And that'll basically it. So what's really cool, as you can tell, this is pretty, dangly. It's not sitting straight. That's kind of sitting straight. This isn't. And so what they've given us are some suction cups. And so basically I'm going to try to put this in here. There we go, just like that. And for the outflow, you would basically hook it up like this, like so. Because this is a small pipe, I think I'll only need one, right? And I'm just going to put that on there. There we go, like so. And this one, same thing. I'm going to grab a suction cup. I'm going to put that on here. Got to finesse it a little bit, but it's definitely not that difficult to set these up. And for the outflow, the suction cup is going to go right over here. So kind of like, there we go, like that. And then I'm going to put that right here. And there you go. So let me move you guys over to the front so you can kind of see. Hopefully there's a bunch of glare. I apologize for that. But hang on. There we go. So as you can see, you've got your inflow that's going into the filter, and this is pushing it out. And I have it, I'm going to adjust, finesse with it once it starts running. It's basically going to push water that way. It's going to hopefully circle either outward this way or that way and go right over to that. And it should be perfectly fine. So that's cool. So the next thing that I just have to do is hook up the other end of the hose to that, and it's going to be very similar to the when I was connecting it to the filter. I'm just going to use these to basically secure the hose to that. So I'll be right back. Okay, so after a lot of wrestling with this hose, I was able to hook it up to the intake and outtake. So you can see right here. I've decided to change the placement a little bit for temporarily. So the outtake is still, or the intake is still going to be here. The outtake I've moved over there because when it was close to here, because of how bendy the hose is, it was not keeping it straight. So I've pushed it back that way. That way at least the nozzle can stay within the water and it's not shooting water out, if that makes sense. So if we move to the front, hopefully you can see that's how it's going to look. And hopefully with the little nozzle right over here, or the strainer, hopefully will get hidden by some of the rocks for the hardscape, and it shouldn't be that big of a problem. So that is the filter, guys, all set up. Pretty exciting. And that's going to be its temporary placement for now. And so the next thing that we're going to talk about is lighting. So let's talk about lighting. Now, there are a few ways that I could light this tank, right? But one of the things you have to understand when you are trying to pick the perfect light for your aquarium is you have to see what kind of inhabitants you are keeping that might require light, basically, like photosynthesis, that needs to photosynthesize, if you will. Because if you're just setting up a fish only tank, then it doesn't, you can easily just put like a cheap LED strip light on there and you should be good to go. But in this case, because we're working with macroalgae, we have to put a light on there that will that gives the perfect parameters for the algae to photosynthesize and to grow, basically. And just a side note in case anybody is wondering what macroalgae is. So macroalgae is basically, for lack of a better term, saltwater plants. And I mean that for lack of a better term. They're not technically what we would consider, like terrestrial plants or even aquatic plants. They're a little bit different than that. But macroalgae come in all different shapes and sizes and different colorations. But for the most part, they are a photosynthetic organism. And if you're going to be keeping macroalgae in your setup, you're going to have to treat it like any other aquarium plant, if you will. And so you need lighting that is going to allow the plants to photosynthesize. And because I'm only going to be keeping macroalgae in here, no coral or anything like that, basically I'm going to be going with the SR Aquaristic planted LED light. Freshwater. So this is for technically freshwater planted tanks. But instead of this being a freshwater planted tank, it's going to be a saltwater planted tank. Now, if I was going to also be keeping coral in this setup, I would not use a freshwater light. I would actually be using the a marine light, LED light, like a coral light, anything that has the parameters that the coral will use. And you can, if you have a smart light, like a light that you can control, you can adjust the parameters so that way the corals are getting the right spectrum as well as the macroalgae are. But anyway, for this particular setup, I decided to go with the SR Aquaristic light. It is a light that I haven't used before, and I was pretty curious about it, and so I decided to get it for this setup. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to unbox this and put it on the tank and see how it goes. Now, full disclosure, I did open this when it came in. I couldn't help myself, which is why the outlet, or the plug, excuse me, is out of the box. Usually it's in the box, but when I was trying to put the box back together, I couldn't fit it in. But, I digress. So we're going to open this up, take a look at it, see what comes with it, and then put it on the tank, and we'll go from there. Alrighty, so hopefully you guys can see this okay. Just try to do a different angle. But yeah, so this is the box, as you can see. SR Aquaristic Aquarium Light Freshwater. planted LED right here. And this is the power cord, or the plug adapter. And so we're going to open this from this side, I believe. There we go. So we have the rods, the mounting kit, if you will, or the hanging kit, or the tank mount, if you will. Excuse me. All right. So it comes with 4 metal rods, and then the tank clips right here. We'll take a closer look at that. We have the controller that allows you to dim the light. There's a blue channel as well as a regular channel, I believe. And this, I'm going to be careful. This is the light. Hopefully you can see it okay. So there's the light. Pretty slick. Kind of like the silver coloration to it. Wish it was in black, to be honest, but beggars can't be choosers, am I right? It's a pretty cool light. So move this back to the side. And I am now going to bring this over to the tank, set that up, and we'll plug it in and see how it looks. Alrighty, here we are. So I just want to point one thing out. First of all, I've got a lid here. This is just a regular Aquarium glass hinged lid. Nothing too fancy. The purpose of this lid is to minimize water evaporation, as well as to prevent any fish jumping out or anything like that. But also, and because of this lid, this light unfortunately can't really hook on to the rim. Technically, you should be fine having this tank, or excuse me, having the light on the rim if I didn't have the lid on there. But because I have the lid on there, it's just a little bit difficult to put this light on. I mean, let's be honest here, it's meant for rimless tanks. But SR Aquaristic says that it's okay for a rim tank. It kinda is. But anyway, so what I've done is I've basically just the light's just resting on the canopy here, and I placed it so that way if I pull the lid up like so, as long as I don't bump into it, it's not going to fall down. It leans back enough that it should be fine. So that's one thing to worry about. But other than that, so it's a perfect fit, as you can tell. And the height is also very good. I didn't want it to be too high up. I didn't want it to be too down either. I think it's perfect because you want to make sure that the macroalgae is getting the enough light that it needs. So, and to be honest with you, most of the macroalgae I'm going to be keeping in here really need like moderate lighting anyway. High preferably, but they should be fine with this lighting. So now I'm going to plug it in and show you guys what it looks like. And there you go. So that's what it looks like. Let me just bring up the controller here. So hopefully you guys can see, but this is the controller right over here, and it has channel 1 and channel 2. It has a plus and minus, and in the middle it has a power button. So if I hit the power button for channel 1, so you can see the blue light just went away. So the channel 1 is for the blue light. I'm going to turn that back on. And then channel 2 is going to be for the white light. And that means it's just going to control the intensity of the white light. So I'm going to turn that back on. And I'm actually going to bring down the blue light a little bit, just a little bit. And I think it looks perfectly fine. Pretty decently bright, to be honest with you. It's kind of hard to see on the camera. It is a an iPhone, and I really like it. Not bad. So that's pretty much the equipment that's going to be on this tank. So we've got obviously the tank, the filtration system, and heater, and as well as our lighting, and that's pretty much all you need for this setup in terms of the hardware, if you will. And in the next video, we're actually going to then talk about the internals of the tank, most notably the hardscape, and the substrate as well. So look forward to that. And I just want to thank everybody for stopping by. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of the project so far, and make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next video that's going to be coming up. And with that being said, make sure you do your water changes, and I will see you next time. Take care.